First question, since we are in DC, how long does it take to get from the Pentagon to here with a police escort?
Lights on or lights off?
Both.
So lights on, you can go remarkably fast with full traffic. Probably 8 minutes.
Was it on or off on the way here?
I can't tell you.
Okay. Yeah, that's a national security secret, apparently. You have been extraordinarily busy. Media hits, videos on Twitter, doing events like this, and it's focused on the Army Transformation Initiative. For the uninitiated in this room, describe in a few words what ATI is and what you hope to gain from it.
Basically, the Army for the last 30 or 40 years has calcified as a decision-making body when you think of our civilians and our politicians. And we haven't moved forward on a lot of things we need to do. And so fundamentally what ATI is with the air cover of the administration and the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, it is doing the right things for the United States Army.
I was going to ask why now, but is that because of Secretary Hegseth? Is that because of President Trump and that cover they're giving you?
It is. So fundamentally, they just have a risk tolerance that just doesn't match, I think, previous administrations. A lot of the changes that have needed to be made are parochially driven. There are a lot of states and congressional districts and lobbyists, and there are rational reasons why it exists the way it is today. Those reasons just are not in the best interest of soldiers.
What's your risk tolerance?
General George and I, when we do these events together, somebody from the audience will always say, I've heard this for the last 30 years.
I was going to say that.
Why now? And I think what we say is he's had a remarkable 35-year career. He's ready to hang it up when the time comes, and I'm probably too young and naive to know the consequences, and so we're going to do it.
What do you make of these descriptions that the Army is doging itself, to turn that into a verb?
I think we take it as a compliment. I mean, I think doge is loaded. You have a lot of people who have these feelings about it. Fundamentally, and I have people who work on that team, or I know people who work on that team, I think they're trying to do what we say the Army, where it's calcified and we have all these inefficiencies just at scale. And when you do it at scale, there's some negative externalities to that. When we have done it to the Army, this has been a soldier-led, soldier leadership with civilian oversight process. And so I take it as a compliment.
Do you guys need Doge's help, or do you guys have this locked down yourselves?
Doge has incredibly talented people from the outside who are coming in and helping lend their expertise. I think on the cost-cutting side, we've cut something like $48 billion in the last couple of months, $48 billion in the next 5 years. So I feel pretty good about that. On the how to reallocate those dollars to make the Army stronger, I think Doge has some incredibly talented individuals. And so that's probably where most of our conversations have been.
And before we kind of switch topics here, I did want to check with you about some comments you made on a podcast earlier. Everyone's asking this, so I need to as well. You said you will measure the success if one of the primes is no longer in business within 2 or 3 years. What exactly did you mean by that?
There was a little more nuance.
Yes.
I then said...
You only have like 11 minutes.
Yeah, and I then said, and that the remaining ones are stronger.
Yes.
But then I always add, like, and I don't care which is which, just to kind of make it more spicy. I think what I mean is this system has optimized for these big, giant companies who are good at playing the system. And so if you look at the Humvee as an example, the United States Army has not requested a Humvee in a very long time. And what practically happens is companies invest in lobbyists, and they talk to congressmen, and they talk to senators. We submit our budget, and then it gets added on, jammed on us. And then even more spectacularly, for like the Humvee as an example, we then have to ship that Humvee to a depot in somebody's state and get analog brakes put on it and then ship it back. And then the Humvee just sits on the sidelines, so we never wanted it. I think that system has just created very bad behavior in a lot of the companies in the defense space. And so what I mean by that is any company who continues to operate that way and optimize their resources, not to innovation, not to what the American soldier needs to stay safe, I hope they go out of business.
There's the soundbite, and then there's the nuance.
There you go.
To that point, the Humvee, an older example, M10 Booker.
Yep.
That's by all means much newer. Why cancel the M10 Booker?
So the original intent was you want an armored vehicle that could be airdropped into somewhere that a regular tank couldn't go. And then this back to kind of the comment on putting a prime out of business. What we've had to do as the United States Army is be reflective, and we own a lot of the bad behaviors that we now don't like. We have been and are an awful customer. We put out requirements that are impossible. Our timelines are ridiculous. Our testing is just irrational. We are the equivalent of a car driver going 1 mile an hour and we are the killing engine or a killing machine of our country. It just doesn't make any sense. And so I think what we have to do is look at ourselves and say, where are we creating things that just don't make sense? So the M10 Booker, as an example, what it ended up being is it's too heavy to drive on a lot of the bridges at our own bases. We couldn't do the things we wanted with it. It's like classic sunk cost fallacy. And so we went to the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Steve Feinberg, and we said, hey, we got this one wrong. We spent way too much money on it. We could either do what the Army used to do, which is hide it and continue to buy these and field them, and then we're going to have it in our lives for a long time. We can just rip the Band-Aid off and say, we made a mistake. We're not buying anymore. So that's what we've done.
This might be the most controversial question of the night. Is the M10 Booker a tank?
I think my exact quote on it was, now that we're canceling it, you can call it whatever.
Okay. So in this audience, we have a ton of people here in this room, and many of them want to do business with the Pentagon. How do you make that easier when you yourself have said the Army is not the best customer of the world?
So I think we are acknowledging it. We are trying to fix it. And those words should be meaningless to you until you start to see it. Anecdotally, I'm proud of a lot of the things we're doing. So we're talking to a lot of the big defense companies and trying to bring them in earlier. But what we did 7 weeks ago, we were on the West Coast. There was a company, Applied Intuition. My very crude description of it is it makes the brain or the back end autonomy software for a lot of non-Tesla vehicles. And General George and I were walking around and looking at the vehicles, and they had Ferraris and Lamborghinis and like these very cool things. And we said, have you ever done a military vehicle? And they said, no. That's terrible. It takes years. We have to fill all these forms. The requirements are awful. We'll never make our money back. And we just turned to the team and said, get them a Humvee and an infantry squad vehicle in the next week. And they said, well, what do you want us to do with it? We said, just take 10 days. Do anything you can. Make it look cool. So we got them a vehicle. 10 days later, they sent us a video, fully autonomous. They had linked it with their drone network. It was awesome. 2 days later, we had a carrier there. We took these new vehicles. We drove them to our training units. Our soldiers, from start to finish, within 25 days, are testing these things and sending us videos of whether it works or not. And so, like, that's the place where Silicon Valley and a lot of these venture-backed businesses have figured out what minimum viable product means and what it means to get it in the hand of your customer and learn from them. And we, the United States Army, have to do that, and we are trying to do that. And what we want for the company is we want to reward you when you deliver things to soldiers that they like and need, and we want to pay you for it very quickly so you have a healthy margin and incentivize you to keep innovating.
And to the same point,
a lot of class for you.
Let's not talk about tariffs. I don't want to.
No, you're good. I don't write about tariffs.
Okay.
Did President Trump's EOs about acquisition reform and foreign military sales help or hurt what you guys are going after?
All help. So, and this is just back very sincerely. I think a lot of people in these roles can be sycophantic, and I don't intend to be with this. I do that sometimes, but in this remark, they are actually willing to take on more pain on behalf of the American soldier and to do what's right for those men and women serving than anyone I have seen before them. Anytime we have harmed through some sort of negative externality from these decisions we're making, because there are jobs, there are people on the other side of every decision we're doing, they have stood completely strong and said, we have to do this. And so I think those EOs were in the same kind of vein.
And so where does AI factor into our conversation today? Obviously, there's battlefield AI and autonomy.
Yeah.
There's also boardroom AI and autonomy. Where are those easy wins? What are the maybe bigger reaches? And what are those pitfalls on the Army's radar?
So we think about General George and I and the leadership team, think about the Army as like two fundamentally different things. One is a large enterprise business that moves people and things around the country and the world. The other is a killing machine. And it is a killing machine that we want to be as effective and violent as it can possibly be so that we don't have to use it in a perfect world. And so what AI can do for us on the business side of things is we, the United States Army, and all of the flaws and all of the calcification, it manifests itself in its most preposterous ways in the Army as a business. So our emails are impossible to get into. It's hard to share information. Every single soldier would tell you that the bane of their existence is doing anything on a computer. When we send them out to the field, they have to use their own their own cell phones and laptops lots of times because our stuff is so bad, and they're bad trade-offs. We have a Nipper network that's unclassified, but it breaks all the time and it's inefficient. So where AI can unlock a ton of value nearly immediately, and one of the things General George and I have done is gone and met with the Googles and the Microsofts and the OpenAIs and the Metas and basically said, just help us transform the business side of the Army just using best practice. And we're incredibly optimistic that that'll be relatively easy. On the Army as a killing machine side, if you think about modern warfare and what's occurring in Ukraine, the sheer volume of inputs is staggering. So when we create a data layer, which we haven't yet, that connects our people and our things and our sensors, there's just going to be so much information flowing around. And targeting and defending against incoming air attacks, it requires a complexity of thought that a human being just can't pull off at scale, particularly at wartime. And so I think AI will start to show up in those formations and in those decisions in probably 12 to 18 months.
To your point about all this data flowing,
Yeah.
tracking everything, I used to write a lot about CJADC2, maybe the worst acronym in the military. Does Project Convergence have a future? Have you thought about that? What does that look like moving forward?
So Project Convergence is one of our kind of premier moments to test new things with soldiers. I think when General George and I were talking about it today, if you think of like Y Combinator and what it did so well is it took American innovation and technology at very small stages and it essentially said, hey, we're going to give you a couple months. We're going to get you ready to tell your story to investors and let the American kind of economic engine capture the things that should live, grow them, and then allow them to sell. I think things like Project Convergence, to me, we should at the end of it have a demo day and we should say, hey, primes, you can invest, venture capital, you can invest, private equity, you can invest, the Army, we can invest, like to highlight things but lead to a moment of investment for the actual testing of the things. What I'm hoping occurs, and I think General George is totally supportive, that we are having soldiers all over our country and the world testing new things nearly every day. What is so cool is I was down at Fort Jackson where we do basic training a couple weeks ago. And these are soldiers who have been in the Army for 5 weeks, and we're running them down their lanes to practice. We have thrown up drones, watching them from the sky. At the end of it, during their after-action review, they're actually seeing what do they look like from a drone's view. And here's what was so remarkable to me. Some of the things that these soldiers had come up with had trickled up through the Army and were becoming our standard practice in our formations 5 weeks after they got there, because they're just a brilliant 19-year-old kid with a good idea. And we, the United States Army, have an incredible asset in our soldiers, and we just need to get those assets paired with American innovators.
So we are getting the hook right now. So you get that's the last word. So Secretary Driscoll, thank you for joining us today. And to the audience, that wraps our program tonight.